Jordan Peterson made a very big announcement on his most recent appearance on the JRE. This is episode 1933. We're sitting at about an hour, 26 minutes, 20 seconds. And I just want you to understand something before I play the clip, just so you really understand what he's talking about. Because myself, I have never heard this word before. Basically, it's a consortium. What is a consortium? A consortium is a group made up of two or more individuals, companies, or governments that work together to achieving a common objective. Entities that participate in a consortium pool resources, but are otherwise only responsible for the obligations that are set in the consortium's agreement. So that's what he has going on. Let me just play the clip, because this could just be something gigantic, and I think it's going to be. Let's play it. Let's go. Coach Colin, coolest high performance coach in the world. Hit that subscribe button for the best insights on podcasts and videos you love. Let's go.
I tweeted out, I don't know if you saw this, that I was going to make an announcement on your show today, and so I set up an international consortium based in London. I can't tell you all the details yet, but we're trying to put together something like an alternative vision of the future, say an alternative to that kind of apocalyptic narrative that's being put forward, at least implicitly, by organizations like the WEF, and that's the virginal planet, rapacious tyrant, all-devouring consumer religion. And it's more like something like, well, we want to ask people 6 key questions. Okay, so how do we get energy and resources at the lowest possible cost, as rapidly as possible, to the largest number of people around the world? That's one question. And so there's a presumption in the question, and here's one of the presumptions. You don't get to save the planet by making energy prices so expensive that no one poor can afford them. That's off the table. So if you want to develop alternative energy sources, no problem. Because, hey, man, the more energy sources we have, the better. But you don't get to impose your utopian vision in the service of your narcissism on the poor. We're going to try to make the poor rich. Can I try to alleviate absolute poverty? Pro-human view. On environmental stewardship front, that's the next question. What are the major problems that are confronting us? How do we take a sophisticated, multidimensional view of that? How do we prioritize our attempts to establish our states and our international relationships properly so that we prioritize human well-being, in harmony with nature to the degree that's possible, but human-focused and not predicated on the idea that there are too many goddamn mouths on the planet to feed and that you're evil if you just think about having children. So then on the governance front, this is where it gets kind of more left-wing, I would say, is none of the people involved in this consortium so far are very thrilled with global corporate fascist government media and corporation collusion. And we're seeing this at the high end. It's like a Tower of Babel, is that the powerful players in the world are increasingly collaborating to impose a top-down vision of the future on everyone. And that's a future that's predicated on a zero-growth model. And the idea that, well, we'd need 5 planets really to support everyone at the current standard of living that obtains in the West. So the best pathway forward is to deny loans by the World Bank to developing countries so they can't develop, energy sources, which all that'll mean is they're going to burn wood and coal, obviously. So that's the third question is, how do we arrange systems of governance to stop the march of something like pathological gigantism? This is why I like people like Russell Brand, and also you to some degree politically, because you guys are very, what would you say, sensitive to the danger of that kind of corrupt collusion, that regulatory capture that occurs when corporate entities and media entities and governmental entities are all in bed together, like the FDA and the CDC and so forth and so on without end. So that's the third question. The fourth question is, what do we put forward as a vision on the family policy front to facilitate the, what would you call it, the encouragement and the maintenance of long-term monogamous couples who are child-centered, and to make increasing the birth rate part of that policy, to put policies in place that would support long-term stable monogamous families, 2-parent families, and child-centered. Because in the West, because we're very immature, we think that the purpose of a marriage is the happiness of the people who are involved in the marriage, the husband and the wife. And that's just not the purpose of marriage at all. The purpose is long-term facilitation of their psychological and spiritual development and the establishment of an environment that's beneficial to children. That's a responsible way of thinking about it. And so we need to have a serious conversation about what that means. And, you know, it's tricky because, like, I think the ideal has to be long-term, committed, monogamous, heterosexual relationships. And I had a big conversation about this with Dave Rubin. You know, Rubin's gay and he's married, and him and his partner now have 2 infants, and we talked through how that was. It was a very hard thing for them to arrange, obviously. Why? Well, they're both male. So that poses a severe problem on the reproductive front, right? And so they managed that. They have 2 infants, but it's very complex, and it's obviously not a solution to the problem of relationship and reproduction that's duplicatable across large numbers of people. It just takes too many resources. Now, I do think we have to have an ideal at the center of every concept. But the ideal can't be too rigid, you know, because people aren't perfect. You know, in my own family, there's lots of people who are divorced. In lots of people's families, there are people who are gay. You know, there are lots of people in unhappy marriages. Nobody attains the ideal. So the ideal has to be surrounded by a fringe of tolerance, but that doesn't mean you sacrifice the ideal. And the ideal has to be, well, we know there's a literature on fatherlessness. You know, it's a bloody catastrophe, fatherlessness, for obvious reasons. You know, human children are complicated. You think you can, maybe if you struggle madly as a single parent, you could do a decent job, and lots of single parents do, but you're asking a lot, you know, for a woman to work 50 hours a week and then spend another 40 hours with her kids, and to do both of those optimally with no help. You know, and we know perfectly well that when women get divorced, especially if they have kids, they tend to fall down the economic hierarchy. So it's very difficult. So that's another one of the policies. Then another question. We're trying to make these into questions rather than, you know, we have the answer. The other question is, well, it's pretty clear that we have to live inside a story. And one story is power rules everything. But that's not a very good story. It's a very pathological story. It's more like a confession, too, if that's the story you insist upon. It's like, so you think power governs everything, do you? Okay, I know what you're like. So that's what you truly believe. See, I believe the spirit of voluntary play governs everything, not the spirit of power. It's like voluntary association. That's what we're doing in this conversation. You know, we're playing towards an end, and we're doing it voluntarily, and we're taking everybody along for the ride. No one's forced to do it. So that's the other thing. No compulsion here. It's got to be invitational. And so we're trying to work out what the story has to be. And on that front, I just finished a seminar in Miami, and the first 8 parts of it were released on the Daily Wire 3 months ago, Exodus seminar. We walked through the story of Exodus. Exodus means ex-hodos, means the way forward. So it's the archetypal narrative of progression from tyranny and chaos into the future. That's what the story is. And we did half of it, released it on the Daily Wire, 8 episodes, 2 hours long. And we just recorded the last 8 sessions 2 weeks ago, and that was an absolute blast. I had really stellar people participating. Man, I learned so much.
So he just gets into like Exodus. He starts talking about YouTube and the Daily Wire and stuff. But the announcement, so it's pretty vague. But at the same time, the most telling thing that I heard is that it's an alternative to what the World Economic Forum is offering, which is mind-blowing, because this is why, to me, the World Economic Forum, if you ever look into them, look into what their mission is, look at the things that they're doing, look at where their road for all of us is leading, it's a little bit chilling. The leader, I believe his name's Klaus Schwab. He has a statement that he's made that in like 2030, all of us will own nothing and will be happy. And also he's decided that we're going to eat bugs, and they are deciding that we're going to go cashless eventually. Like, this is real stuff. You can look into it. They have a lot of initiatives that they're really pushing. And the thing about it is they've asked none of us if we're okay with it. And the reason that they don't have to is because that they're working with all of our governments. Like, well, I shouldn't say all, but most. Like, I know a majority of us are in the USA. They work, very closely with the USA, with Canada, and many places in Europe. Like, I think even Africa, certain parts of Africa are involved. Like, it's a very large, I guess you could say, net that they have, a reach that they have. But they haven't consulted with any of us if we actually want to go down this road with them. They're just deciding. And for Jordan Peterson to say that he now has or is building something or has built something or is in the process of building something that is an alternative to that, that is huge. Very, very huge. But also very interesting, because what happens when he does erect this thing and it's going full steam ahead? Is the World Economic Forum and all of the government officials from around the world that are within the World Economic Forum, are they going to allow this to happen? Like, what's going to happen there? Like, eventually these two entities are going to clash in some way. And what happens from there? It's literally going to be like Klaus Schwab versus Jordan Peterson. But then also, and I'll play more of the clip because I'm just going to leave out a part because they kind of go into other stuff, and then he gets back on track, and I'll play that clip in a minute. But it's like, what happens when those two entities clash, and what is this vision for the future that they have? Like, he's saying that it's going to be people focused, which is amazing. That is what the government should, in essence, that's what the government's supposed to be. It's supposed to be for the people, and it's supposed to be in our best interest always. Our best interest first and foremost always. Not like nothing else. Like, what is best for us as individuals, as a nation, as nations? What's the best? So for him to now say that he's doing something that's people focused and it's supposed to involve or not involve poor people getting poorer. And when he says rich, I'm positive that he means rich in resources, not rich in like money, right? Because that just wouldn't make any sense. Yeah, it's just very, very interesting. I don't think people are making a big enough deal about this. This is something that's going to be, this could be terrible, or it could be the greatest thing that's happened in our time. Again, if you look into the World Economic Forum and what they're about, I mean, you will see that they don't seem like an entity that is going to be very happy with somebody opposing them or offering an alternative to what they have in mind. They really do kind of put their message forward as what we're doing. Like, this is what's happening. So very interesting. But let me play the rest of the clip. I just skipped ahead. So now we're at 1 hour, 41 minutes, 9 seconds. And I believe they should be talking about more of the actual consortium, whatever. I'm bad with words and pronouncing things. I'm sorry.
Job of explaining that in this. And so part of the model that we're trying to put forward in this group that I'm describing is based on this principle of subsidiarity and the idea that we want to encourage everyone to take as much responsibility as possible at the most local level possible, right? So take responsibility for yourself until you're good enough at that so you can take responsibility maybe for a wife. And then if you're good enough at that, maybe you can extend that to some kids, and then maybe you can serve your local community, and then maybe you can serve your state, and maybe if you really get good at it, you could serve your nation, right? But you're taking the responsibility, and here's the basic rule. All the responsibility you abdicate will be taken up by tyrants. That's the cardinal rule of social organization. And so we're trying to build out this story that's based on the deepest elements of Western tradition, that's an antidote to the false claim that it's only power that rules, because it's not. That's not right. And there is a model of proper governance in there, this idea of a hierarchical structure of responsibility. It's the proper computational structure. It's not top-down tyranny with fractionated individuals, and it's not utter chaos. It's ordered freedom. And that's what God tells Moses to tell the Pharaoh when he says, let my people go. Let my people go, no tyranny, so that they may celebrate me in the desert. It's ordered freedom. And it's the ordered freedom that comes along with being oriented towards the highest possible good. And so we're trying to work all that out now. We're going to have a conference in London, October 31st, November 1st, and November 2nd. We're going to bring about 2,000 people together. That's an invited list. We want to bring in people who are cultural figures and political figures, business figures, and invite them to this discussion. But we want to make that completely public, and we want to open up the organization to broad membership, as broad as possible. And then, if it's a success, then we'll open up the conferences as the years progress to larger and larger numbers of people. But we can't, we don't have the expertise or the wherewithal to manage that first off. But we've got the venue already set up in London. I've got all sorts of people on board in Australia and all through Europe and through the UK and all through the United States, South America. All sorts of people are interested in participating. And so we want to help put forward a vision that's enticing and inviting. It's like, imagine you could have the world you wanted. None of this Malthusian limits to growth nonsense. We get our act together. Everyone can have it, can have enough, and maybe more than enough. There'll be enough educational opportunity for everyone. No one will be scrabbling away in the dirt, burning dung, poisoning themselves. Enough food for everyone. There's also an idea in Exodus, and this is a very good idea, that if people organize themselves properly, so they're oriented on a transcendent axis and they're oriented towards their fellow man, so you serve what's highest and you also abide by the principle of reciprocity in relationship to other people. If we organize ourselves in that manner, there's no limit to the abundance the natural world can produce. That's the actual generator of genuine wealth, sustainable wealth, that balances order and chaos properly, that balances nature and culture properly. So the core idea is something like you get the hierarchy of social organization right, it generates unlimited wealth. And we've already seen that to a large degree. We've lifted more people out of poverty in the last 15 years than really, it's unparalleled. 7 out of 8 billion people now either have the minimum they need or something exceeding that. And instead of, starving to death by the billions, which is what everybody who was on the Malthusian side predicted back in the 1960s. And so I've been working on this for a long time, and I've got a good group of core people who seem to be, reliable and not motivated, we hope and pray, by something approaching, narcissistic egotism, and everybody's sworn to try to make this as decentralized as possible on the principle that the more responsibility you can offload to people, the better everything will work. That's a fundamentally conservative principle, like a small c conservative principle, right? So you need a hierarchy of responsibility, and you offload responsibility to the local where possible. I think it's a good principle.
Let's hold that.
Joe Rogan has to pee. For the first time, he broke it before somebody else, which is wild. I also think that there's a bit of discussion that happens when he has to go to the washroom. I just think so. I'm not sure what, but this is very exciting to hear. And it's not like, because Jordan Peterson is going to save the world, but just the fact that it proves that people can get together and offer alternative visions for what they think the future should be like, or the future that would actually be best for all of us. Because in recent years, it seems like a lot of what's happening in the future is going to be really good for the people that are rich and not so much for the people that are poor, and that is scary because, a lot of people aren't in a position living check to check, living that regular life of you're working this job, and if a robot takes over that job, it's like, and you lose it, it's like, what are you going to do? You have no clue. There's a lot of people in that position. And it just seems like these ultra rich, powerful government people, they don't have us in mind as much as I'd like to see. I don't know about you. So to hear somebody coming with this other vision that is vague right now, maybe he's said quite a bit, but is more people focused, you know, I think it's going to be something special. And if not it actually being something special, at least it'll be maybe a precursor to something that's even better one day. Because it's like, at least now we know that this is possible. So who knows where this goes, but at least now it's like other people in the future, you know, maybe even the near future, will look and be like, well, this, and this is what they got wrong. So let's go and try and do this again, guys. It's like, it just produces a good conversation that you can get thousands of people together and like make real change, come up with a real vision, have everybody be focused on it together and bring about some real change. So I'm really excited to see what Dr. Peterson makes of all this. I really can't. And it's going to oppose the World Economic Forum. So I'm hoping everybody who's on the alternative side of the World Economic Forum, I hope they stay safe. And if I can get tickets to this thing that he's talking about, I definitely will. And I'll cover it live. That's a promise. I'm out. Peace.